said, okay, nobody will give a look. We'll think about it. So thankfully, because he wasn't taking his heart meds.
Okay, I think we are ready. Yeah.
Welcome everyone to Kol Shalom's first social justice in-person event of the year. We're so excited to have everyone here and a wonderful number of people here in person and anyone who's streaming on YouTube and Facebook. Welcome. Tonight we have the pleasure of having a talk by Johanna Munson, who is a highly practical and deeply spiritual entrepreneur whose soul-centered leadership brings you peace of mind through end-of-life planning. We all plan for babies, but we don't plan for death. Who's going to die?
We're all immortal.
As an end-of-life educator and peace of mind guide and the CEO of End-of-Life Resources, she supports adults to face the often challenging conversations and decisions around end-of-life planning. Johanna works with clients and their families to put together a roadmap for loved ones to follow with her signature program, End-of-Life Peace Plan. As a licensed Willow end-of-life educator, she offers interactive workshops on advanced care planning topics such as how to have conversations about this tender topic and writing your own eulogy. She came to this field of work after the death of her father in 2019, as she had supported him through the last 5 years of his life and experienced firsthand the value of planning ahead for the end. Johanna is an experienced educator and coach and brings her deep appreciation for the human capacity for continued growth to her work with clients. Planning brings peace, and that is her wish for all. I welcome Johanna Munson.
Thank you, Karen. Well, it's so nice to be with you all this evening. Thank you for coming in out of this beautiful, suddenly summer weather that we're having. It's a joy to be with you here tonight, and it's an honor to be asked to share some of what I do and to give you an experience of talking about these things, because for most of us, we live in a culture that's pretty averse to talking about death and dying. It used to be that people died at home, before the Civil War, and it was just part of life. And there was somebody in each community who would help families, be there as the person aged and died. And children saw it growing up. That was, normal for them. And then lots of kids died too, because there were so many illnesses. And then in the Civil War, things kind of changed. People went far away. They died out far away from home. And that's when the practice of embalming started. And from what I understand, that's not allowed in the Jewish tradition. But for others, that was really when the separation of death, life and death, started to happen. So I call this the gift your family won't return, right? And that's because it does bring peace of mind to talk about these things ahead of time. And so we'll be talking about things like the heart, soul, and mind of end-of-life planning. So why would we want to plan ahead? Well, we never know when we're going to be incapacitated, right? It's not just actual end of life. In my dad's case, he moved into assisted living 2 years before he died, but he had several incidents where he ended up in the hospital, but then he came back and he was able to resume life. Maybe not at the same level, but certainly wasn't ready to go at that point. So the things we're talking about are equally as valid for when we have a surgery and somebody needs to take over our accounts, for when we go on a long vacation maybe, and, so somebody else knows what's going on in your life. Another advantage is that you get to make the decisions, right? And then you have a better chance of having your wishes followed. If you leave it up to the doctors, You know what the doctor's motto is?
Do no harm.
Do no harm, right? And usually that means preserve life at all costs, which is not necessarily what you would choose. Is it going in and out? Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, great. Yeah, so do no harm can mean follow your wishes, but if your wishes aren't documented and written down, then they're not going to be sure what to do, and they most likely will try all kinds of measures to prolong your life. It's great to start while you're healthy, because then you have the point of view, you have the mental space, the emotional space. You're not in a crisis, right? And trying to do these kinds of make these kinds of decisions when you're under a lot of stress can be really, really challenging. So the fact that you're all up and you walked in here, that's very encouraging. You're in the right time of your life to be making these decisions. And believe it or not, once you've made these decisions, it really does allow you to live life more fully. And that's because it's not just sort of hanging over you. We never know when something might happen, and so for your loved ones to know what your wishes would be in that case gives them peace of mind, gives you peace of mind. And the first thing we're going to do is talk about our values. And so it's kind of a chance to look at your life and say, am I living my life according to what really matters to me? And are the people in my life those that I really want to be in my life? So, as I said, I call it the heart, soul, and mind of end-of-life planning. So we're going to do what I call the values exercise, and this is the heart part of end-of-life planning. So I'll show a list of values on the screen for those at home, and I'll hand out a copy for you guys and give you pens. So, it's a long list, and there are probably many more on it that are not listed, but I ask that you choose 5 that really speak to you. And you'll probably have a lot more than 5 on there that you want to choose, but some of them might, combine. Anyway, we're going to stick with just 5. And then we're going to think of a decision that you need to make, and then look at those values and say, okay, how would this value apply to it? Or if I made this decision and I didn't do it, would that mess up my whole life because I'm not following that value? So I'll give you an example. One of the values might be generosity, okay? And so the decision is, how am I going to divide my assets? Well, there's this cause, maybe it's animal welfare or social justice or some really important cause that you're devoted to. My kids, one is in med school, the other is an engineer. They're probably going to be doing okay. They might like some of, if they got a big chunk of inheritance, but maybe it's more important to me that my generosity be shown, or what's the word I'm looking for? Demonstrated, yeah, by giving to this very important cause that wouldn't necessarily have that kind of funding otherwise. So here is the list. Oops.
If you were on Zoom, it would really test.
Can you see it? Did you need a pen?
I have one.
You got one? Okay.
Taking the rest of my life.
Yeah. Just read it through once. Read it through back where you got a pen. Great.
Thank you.
My value is to be prepared.
Okay. Got a pen. Great.
Thank you, Joanna.
Yes.
Oh, this is
You
more
got
than one.
2.
This is more than one. Okay, if I can figure out.
Yeah.
Fingers to-
There you go.
I'm gonna have to share. Here is the other one.
Okay. Great.
There's plenty of them.
Yeah, you can take it, because you'll want to take this home and continue to work with it. So sometimes you pick one and then another one is sort of similar, and so when I'm working with clients, I have them go through it and pick maybe 10, and then we try to narrow it down by grouping them together. But since we're not spending that much time on this exercise today, just go ahead and pick 5. Oh. So go back for the people at home. How's it going? Anybody like to share the ones that they chose?
I like the F's, fairness, faith, and family.
Okay, that's a good alliteration there, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit,
Right.
because to me, everything else kind of falls under that.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's a good way to think of it. Then you can sort of draw lines or, include some of the other ones in that, yeah. Yes.
Consciousness, because that's what the first thing is, lose.
Mm.
Courage, because it's a lot of courage. You can't get old without courage.
Right.
Creativity,
Mm-hmm.
which is really important. Gratitude for what we have.
Mm-hmm.
And what was my last one? Intimacy.
Intimacy. That's something that's lovely to continue. That sense of touch is important to the very end. Great, thank you. Yeah. Anybody else want to share? No pressure. Yes, Karen.
Equality and fairness, honesty, loyalty, justice, and trustworthiness.
Mm. Lovely. All right, so we're going to do a little interactive exercise here. If you want to get up and move so you're not with the person that you came with, that's fine, or if you want to discuss it with them. So share with them what your 5 values are, and then pick a decision that you might be making about end-of-life planning. So what are some decisions that you might have to consider?
Oh, sure.
Do you want to die alone or with people?
Okay, do you want to die alone or with others? Mm-hmm.
Some
And-
people would rather be alone. Some people want someone there.
Yeah, when my dad died, he was at the Madison House, called the Mark. We used to call it the Mark. And he was an introvert, and so my sisters and I were there during the day for his last week of life. But he told us, I don't want you here 24 hours a day. And he did end up dying at about 3:30 in the morning, and I do believe that was his choice.
I've heard of people that have had the family around them set them out of the room
Yes.
so that they could die.
Yeah, or they'll be in the room and somebody says, finally, just got to go to the bathroom, I'll be right back. And in that time, they take their leave. So.
Another one is do you want music?
Right.
Quiet.
Quiet music, any kind of scent. Yeah, did you have?
I was just gonna note that our lists ended up being almost entirely overlapping.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Like given we're together.
Yeah, that's pretty
a good
nice.
thing, right?
Definitely.
On the other hand, Mike and I have been married 50 years and none of us overlap on any of it.
Well, opposites attract, right? There's advantages to both.
There you go.
All right, so think of one of those decisions. Do you want to go into assisted living or do you really want to live at home for as long as possible? Things like that. And so find a partner or talk to the person next to you, and give you about 5 minutes to share, and you guys can do it in a set of 3 if that's easier. Did you? Nice.
I have a hard time picking between creativity and
Love, yeah.
And I thought creativity overlapped with learning, but
Right, that's,
community.
For me, creativity is the first thing.
yeah.
Yeah, community was, faith was the first thing. But yeah, justice, learning.
Great, yeah. Great. So think of a decision that you are.
So yes, I want that. But if it's not one of those, not one of those.
So, what are you discussing?
We're discussing whether to be in a facility or,
Try to stay at home.
yeah.
Yeah.
I had enough trouble picking these. I had enough trouble. I can't even imagine making these decisions. It's like, well, maybe, it's really, it's such a, we have so much to learn.
Yeah. I don't think so. Yeah, and
I mean, I do actually imagine, over the years, I have twin sons, and I imagine that the way that I would like to die is to hear them singing.
that's a great start.
Together.
Yeah. So, the family then is really important.
Of course, they would be arguing about the song.
There's probably time for more than one song.
Well, I think it a lot of it depends on the health. If I was really sick, then I guess the hospice would be the best place to be. But it could be. But if you need a lot of care, either way. But home would be my choice, and hopefully, it would be not going
Yeah.
either I live to be old, which is a possibility, or die of something quickly, like cancer.
Yeah, that's what my dad wished for, but it didn't work out that way. So he just, he was in a lot of, this being on this, I guess it's going to, here, turn this off.
Yeah, I'll just, he was 87. He was in a lot of pain. I had to kind of just find his root core factors. I actually decided to stop eating years ago. But I needed to
Not exactly something that will show.
Yeah, 98. But he was in perfect health. All right, so what is other decisions? What are some other decisions you have to make?
All right, I can see there's very interesting and deep conversations happening, and this is what I love about doing these in person is, having a chance in a space that feels, relatively safe, to just be able to dive into this. Your name's Joyce was saying, these decisions feel really hard, and they are. They're not something you do lightly. And
I feel like I'm not thinking about what decisions there might be.
mhm.
You know,
Can you say that another way? I'm not sure.
so, it was clear, I think a big decision is whether to be in a facility, assisted facility,
Mhm.
depending on what kind of care you need, or to be at home.
Mhm.
But what other kinds of, very often a medical situation determines,
Mhm.
so you don't make that decision. But that's the major decision, whether to be
Mhm.
home or to.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest ones. But we'll talk about some of the mind parts of end-of-life planning, which would be like a will, and then you need a financial power of attorney, and you need a advance directive and a medical power of attorney. So if you have a partner, they may or may not be the best person to play that role. If they're going to be wanting to just be your spouse or your child, there are alternatives, or if you have a lot of children and you can't pick from among them, or you don't have any kids, there are companies that will play that role for, have people to hire for that. Yeah, and but for people who really don't have an option, you do need someone there to talk to who knows your decision, your wishes, who can talk to the medical staff.
The wishes change. If your health changes and you have a lot of pain and you
Yeah.
don't want to be around, that's one thing.
And the
But if
real
you-
reason to do this is for when you're incapacitated and you
Yeah.
can't change your mind. You
Yeah,
can't
well,
speak.
The
So
thing that I'm worried about, and probably is going to happen to me, is I'm probably going to lose it here, first.
mhm.
And if, then who cares? You don't know what's going on anyway.
But Michael, then, the thing is, if you have something where you're mentally incapacitated, who would you want to make some of those decisions? How far gone do you want to be before
What
someone
decision?
pulls the plug?
What decision?
Well,
Where
I'm
to,
sorry.
no, really, the big one is, like you said, where to live. If your family isn't capable of taking care of you at home, then hopefully you have the finances to pay for memory care.
But when it comes to who's gonna pull the plug, I
Mhm.
think that's something you should probably be talking to.
Mhm.
When I made my will, I made out separately how I want them to be buried, and I talked to my daughter about that.
Yeah, and that takes a great burden off of them. So those are some more of the decisions.
But it's still hard. I remember, because I talked to my mom, her last year of life, she lived with me,
Mhm.
and I said, is this what you want? Do you want this? But when you're standing there, your instinct is, and the person is dying, the instinct is, do something, don't let them die.
I know.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah,
Even though you know.
I know, right?
Well, if you have
Yeah.
both a living will and a regular will, it's pretty much covered.
But the conversations are key. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I got into this work. So my mom, Faith Munson, died in 2007, and she was here on Bainbridge. She had a sudden diagnosis of leukemia, and 5 weeks later, she was gone. And she spent most of that time at Swedish over in Seattle, so we commuted back and forth to see her. My dad was just in shock and couldn't believe this was happening. And she ended up going into ICU. The chemo didn't work, and we assumed she would have wanted to come home to die here. She had a beautiful garden, lovely home and co-housing, but they wouldn't even let her get in an ambulance because she was so weak. And so they were able to bring her up to the hospice floor of the hospital, but she was already unconscious by then. So we didn't really get a chance to say goodbye, although, hearing, they say, is the last one to go. So the whole time we were in ICU with her, we were singing songs. And we sang, She'll Be Coming Round the Mountain, and she objected to that one. Most of them she really enjoyed, but that one, she made it very clear that that was not okay. So we thought our dad would go soon after. Yeah, you were saying that, it's what, you said
6 weeks.
6 weeks. Her mother died, and then her father died 6 weeks after. But my dad had me here, my sister here. He lived in co-housing. He had a great community, and he lived 11 more years.
Oh, my.
Wow.
Which was a surprise. Well, my mom was 74 when she died, so she was fairly young. But he actually was the one who started wanting to talk about end-of-life things, and I was like, I don't think so. He read Atul Gawande's book, Being Mortal. Have you seen that? It's sort of about quality of life, and that is something we each determine for ourselves. And in one case, the guy was like, okay, as long as I can sit in my recliner and eat chocolate ice cream and watch sports on TV, I'm good. I want to be alive. My dad was not like that. He was athletic and loved running and then walking and bike riding. His last wheels were a wheelchair, and as long as he could get himself around the facility, get outside around the parking lot, he was like, okay, this is okay. And we talked about it at first, and he at first said, when I have to go in a wheelchair, that's it, I'm done. I really don't think I want to live anymore. But like you said, your ideas change. And he got to the point where he had to be in a wheelchair, but he could still get himself around. And so, but then he had some falls, and his stability went way downhill. His ability to eat, feed himself, suffered. Ended up in ER, came back, and came back to a certain level. It's this stair step, right? Thing where you're at this level and something happens, you need to go down a bit. Maybe you come back, but not as far, and then something else happens. And he got to the point where he just decided that the quality of life wasn't there, and so he ended up choosing to stop eating and drinking. It's called voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. And we had hospice in place well before that. They supplied morphine and anti-anxiety drugs, and the facility was supportive. My sisters and I were all, by that time we'd had lots of conversations. And so it took him a week, and he died what looked like a peaceful death. So I actually feel less regret and guilt about his death than I do about my mom's, because we had had so many conversations. So this is why I'm here, is to get you guys talking, right? So the last point here, this is sort of the beginning of what might be your legacy. Using these values to make decisions. You can start writing why these values are important to you, because we get to decide to some extent, not 100%, but how we want to be remembered, maybe not how we're remembered. But legacy is not just leaving lots of money or property or jewelry, things like that. It's really, who was this person who's now gone, and what did their life mean? Mm-hmm.
I got a great gift from one of my daughter-in-laws, and she gave me this gift. What was the name of that?
Storyworth.
Oh yes, Storyworth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I write 2 or 3 things a month about answer questions.
Yeah.
And they're very deep, and some are very light. Like the last one I got, what's your favorite joke? But you get then they take all these things and they make a book out of
for
it,
you. Mm-hmm.
So that's a good way to leave.
Yes, yeah.
People can remember me as
Exactly, and to have that relatively easy way of doing it, where you don't have to come up with the prompts. They send you the questions and then combine it all. And can you add pictures and things like that?
No, I haven't, but But,
They
I,
probably can.
yeah, but I have some paintings that I'll leave, Joyce and I both paint, we leave
Yeah.
them to the kids, and I think they'll, every time they look at the painting, they'll think of us.
Definitely, yeah. My mom was a wonderful artist. Great. All right, so we've covered the heart, and we'll talk briefly about the mind. So basic things, will or trust.
I just want to
yeah.
go back to the heart for a minute.
Sure.
So I'm imagining having conversations with my children, and I'm thinking. So I say, okay, so how do you do that? The first decision together, separately would be my choice, certainly. And so, but make an announcement.
We'll talk about that in the soul part. So,
soul.
Yes, yes, because as a mom, right, that's really, it's hard for adult children to hear about. I was like this with my dad.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you for bringing that up, and it is very important to have those conversations. So, will or trust, having somebody ready to take over your finances. I was financial power of attorney for my dad the last 3 years of his life, and he had an advance directive. It's the same thing, living will, 5 wishes. You may have heard of those other names for them. So you only need one. You don't need all of them. And then the medical power of attorney goes along with the advance directive. And then you need a HIPAA release form, the Health Information Portability and Accessibility Act form that you sign every time you go to the doctor. But that allows other people to see your health information.
And one really good thing to know about the HIPAA is you might have a neighbor you're close with who you would like to talk to the doctor about you,
Yeah.
or a friend who's not family. You can put a HIPAA release to them, so that person can also be and talk, because if it's not there, the hospital won't tell you anything.
Yeah.
And sometimes, your kids, yes, but there's also other people in your life who you're close to, you can put them in there. It doesn't have to be a relative.
No, and it doesn't have to be just your medical power of attorney.
Another thing is that I was told to put everything on the refrigerator because that's where everybody looks. And I put everything on the refrigerator like 10, 15 years ago. And every time EMS comes in, they look on the refrigerator. They pull down everything that's there, put it in a plastic bag, and just put it on the refrigerator.
Yeah, yeah,
All these.
All of them,
carvings
yeah.
and stuff.
yeah.
So it's all in one place, and they all know to look on the refrigerator. I thought that was wonderful.
Yes, it's like,
And you can include your dog in that too if you have a pet, what you want to happen to your pet.
important to have that, yeah. Yeah, and there are other things in the mind, getting all your information gathered and accessible. Like I was talking about, making sure somebody knows how to pay your bills and what's going on. So if your spouse has been the one who's taken care of this your whole life together, maybe it's time to make sure that the other one knows how to do that and where the information is. For adult children, right, you come into an emergency crisis situation and they have no idea where things are, how bills are paid. I know with my business I have so many different accounts for this and that, and for my kids to figure all that out, if how to shut down your business if you're still working. So that's all in the mind part, and we're not going to spend a whole lot.
Passwords.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I highly recommend a password manager. I know people who aren't into tech don't really like the idea of it being online. But if you don't do that, have a notebook where you keep them updated. And
I'm not sure what the 5 wishes is.
it's a type of living will or advance directive, and it's supposedly very simple. They're just 5 sections, and that's why it's called five wishes. Yeah.
But it doesn't include everything. It's
No.
in Washington, but if you use that, there's going to be other questions that you're not answering.
Yeah. I really like the End of Life Washington advance directive, and that's available at endoflifewa.org. All right, so let's talk about the soul part. I really impress upon people that I work with that we all need this circle of caring. And it's wonderful to have a group like this where, that's part of the mission. I'm with Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church, and we have pastoral care. And so we can, do some, not if somebody gets really ill and needs constant care. But if it's temporary, we can help with meals and so on. So first go-to place, obviously, is your family and close friends. But anybody have kids or family members on the island? You're lucky if you do.
Seattle.
Yeah. My sister is here, so I'm really, really so lucky to have her around. And we're each other's power of attorneys. There's also the wonderful IVC, Island Volunteer Caregivers, but again, they're not going to do everything for you if you get incapacitated. So there are several elder care advisors. I don't do that part where I'm actually, providing or connecting you with caregivers, helping you make decisions at that point. But I can certainly connect you with people who do that. And then, as I mentioned, there are companies that will take over that role for you. And there are two I know of that work over in Kitsap County, Pro Fiducia and Ohana. And it's peace of mind. Like I mentioned, if you don't have family, that's one reason to use them. But maybe there are too many in your family, and you can't decide which would make the best power of attorney, or if you picked one over another, then that would create some tension among them. So there are many reasons to choose a fiduciary. Yeah.
I just want to say that I was named healthcare surrogate as well as financial. It's, in my opinion, having had to do it and deal with the hospitals every day with my dad is still alive, was too much. I gave the financial to my brother. People think those aren't, they're not, they're huge.
Yeah,
They're
each
both
one.
huge, and if you can give somebody else one of them,
Yeah.
in my opinion, doing that now, I would recommend.
Yeah, I did both for my dad, even though my sister was here. She just wasn't in the frame of mind to do that for him, and so it gave me the experience that now I can, do this and help other people. But yes, that is one thing I definitely suggest, is to split the roles. Great. Any questions on this part? So when I work with clients and we're talking about soul things, it's like, at the end of my life, where would I want to be? What kind of setting would I be most comfortable in? As I am, leaving my body, do I want people around? Are there special music or pets, or just any of those directions that will help your loved ones take care of you at the end. And it's hard to imagine ourselves at that point, right? But think about what relaxes you now, what makes you feel comfortable, and that's a good place to start. And then there are things like our service, memorial service or funeral, and I know there are some, if you're in a religion that has more traditional set ways of doing things, that takes a lot of the stress off of loved ones. But in our case, UUs don't really have any set traditions. It's pretty much what you want. And we were in such a state of shock that we didn't feel like we could speak at her service, give any kind of eulogy. And so one of her very good friends said that she would do that part. But it was like bringing together all these pieces and trying to make it happen. And luckily, the Cedars was very helpful. And then I did have conversations with my dad about it, and he said, "Oh, just do what you did for Mom." Okay, we got that covered.
the doctors aren't willing to work with you,
Mm-hmm.
and hospice doesn't acknowledge. My husband very much wanted to end his life,
Mm-hmm.
and he had lived enough,
Mm-hmm.
and he wasn't capable anymore,
Yeah.
and nobody would acknowledge that he wasn't doing well,
Mm-hmm.
and it was so frustrating. And finally, he just took himself off all his meds.
Mm-hmm.
And even when he got into the hospital and said, I don't want anything, they still wouldn't accept the fact that he died 3 days later.
Mm-hmm.
But they just was so anti-death.
Right. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
people in Kitsap though who will work with you with the Washington laws on death
Yes.
and dignity and help through
But
that.
he wasn't dying. That's the
Mhm.
problem. There was no doctor that would say he was dying.
He wasn't
He wasn't
mortally
dying.
ill.
That's right.
He
He
was
wanted to die.
spiritually ill.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
he had
Yeah.
had it.
Yeah.
That was it. There was he could no longer function the
Mhm.
way he wanted to.
Exactly.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll never forget the ethicist saying, well, we'll get back to you. I said, well, how many doctors have to get back to us? And what's an ethicist to do about this anyway? I mean, how do you feel about that? I mean, oh, please. It was, I tore my hair out for about 3 months.
Wow.
And it was exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say, for people who are, if you're a member, and you have to be a member of CKS, we have a policy. If you choose to be in the cemetery, and it's all set up. That's everyone's choice, and that includes both cremated or otherwise. So there is a written policy that we're continually revising, but there is something there so that if that's something you want, you have to be a member, but it also can include other people, your spouse and whatnot.
But you know, there's a problem, and I've seen it happen many times. People will have a do not resuscitate, and that nurse will resuscitate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so if you have what's called a POLST form, Physician's Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, that's this neon green form that goes on your refrigerator. And you have to have somebody there who will advocate for you and say, no, don't do anything. And the Bainbridge EMTs are very well trained, and they would follow that, especially if there's someone to advocate. But once you get into a hospital, especially because most of our hospitals are now run by Catholic organizations, and they don't believe in letting people die.
Yeah, you have to really, really think, this is what mother or father
Yeah.
wants, and don't touch her.
Don't do it. Yeah. Yeah, and that's why the advance, you can specify that in your advance directive, and that you don't want.
Well, you can specify it, but if you're not there.
Right, and so back to that for a minute, give your power of attorneys the copies of it. Copies are equally as valid as the original. Carry a copy with you in your car, in your suitcase, if you go traveling, anywhere you can think of. Give it to your kids, to a neighbor. The more people who know, the better the chances are that your wishes will be followed. All right, so we're going to talk about how do we start these conversations. So one of the easiest things to do is to use context, and that can be something like there's a illness or death in the family, and then you have a conversation. So what would you do in this situation? Would you make the same choices? Would you choose something differently? Share what your own feelings are. And so if you can put some reality, this is happening to this person, but it's not us, it's not happening right here. That can help with giving that space that makes it possible to talk about it. You're watching a movie or a TV show and something comes up around death or illness or incapacitation. It's a great, if you're streaming it, just pause for a minute and say, this is interesting. What would you do here? And then another way to approach it is just to be curious, right? You can show them the values worksheet and say, what would you choose? And this is something I chose. And I was thinking about this part of, my life to come in the next years, and how this value would play into that. And then if it's you know, practicing with a friend, so asking them about their experience with maybe their parents as they reach the end of their lives, so taking away that immediate in the family kind of emotional level, and practice with some other people first. And then it's not quite as heartrending. It's hard. I have 2 kids. My daughter's about to turn 25 and she's in med school. She said they hardly get any training in the first 2 years on how to work with people at their end of life.
You mean sensitivity, like grief training?
Yeah. Yeah. And then there are some games to use.
End of life deck.
Yeah.
I like that deck.
So,
Oh my goodness.
yes, so we're going to use these.
This is a real thing.
It's a real thing right here. Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Go Wish.
Companies have come up with these. Yeah. Yeah. So the first one I saw was this death deck, and it's kind of a snarky, has kind of a snarky feel to it. So it might be good for, I don't know, millennials or something. But this is one that will demonstrate sort of the attitude. You find your absolute dream home, but learn the previous owner was brutally murdered inside. Still interested? A, sure, assuming they've done a spectacular cleanup job. B, maybe, depends on where it happened. C, no way. Once a murder house, always a murder house. So you got to be prepared if you.
Which one is that? That's death.
That's the death deck. Yeah, yeah. So I think they realized that that might be a bit much for some of us, and so the same.
So how does that lead into a discussion of, I don't know, heart and
Well,
soul?
it's your attitude about like the
That's one card.
after effects of
Probably other things.
after effect of death, right? Being comfortable in a house where death happened, and given if our house is anything but brand new, chances are that might have happened. But the other ones are, there's all kinds of other ones, but I don't want to go through all of them. Here's another one, no, we won't do that. So I'm going to do some of the ones from this EOL deck. Would there be differences in how your family would treat your medical condition if you couldn't speak for yourself? So this, again, is where you have 3 choices. So would there be differences in how your family would treat your medical condition if you couldn't speak for yourself? So if choice A is no, I've been very clear with my instructions. B, they would argue, but ultimately agree. And C, yes, they struggle with choosing a restaurant. Here's another one. In your final days, would you pray or meditate? A, full throttle prayer. B, massive mindful meditation. C, let's just see what's on TV. So there's a little bit of humor, but it's not quite as sort of.
Don't people play those, like they hand out cards randomly and then you sit around with whoever you're doing this with, and then people get to answer them, and you hand out cards in the deck, and it's sort of that they're.
Yeah, and then this go wish one is you actually get 2 sets, so you can play this with another person, and they're just all kinds of sort of some of these decisions, right? To have my funeral arrangements made, to maintain my dignity, and so the idea is you go through the deck and you pick your top 10 cards that are most important to you, and then your next 10, and then your next 10. And then you compare those, or you talk about them with the other person. To have a nurse I feel comfortable with. So then that really helps your partner or your kids, whoever you're having these conversations with, to understand what would help you feel.
Could you pass around the deck so we can look at it?
Yeah, but I do want you guys to do something together first. How are we doing on time?
It's nearly 8.
Were we finishing at 8, or were we? Should we go a few more minutes? I'd really,
It's,
Do we have to end today? Do we have to end?
no, we don't.
no, I'm happy to stay, so. All right, so I picked some cards from the EOL deck, and one has multiple choice and one is just straight answer. So do you want to do the mix up and do it with not your partner? Shall we mix it up this time? Okay.
No.
No, you want to stay put? All right. I'll give you guys these two.
I think it's more important.
Some of us are, yeah.
We're not, we're partners.
That's fine. Okay.
Yeah, we have two.
Yeah.
For myself.
So how do you want us to do this?
So there's one with the multiple choice and
Stimulation.
Would bring you comfort in the end.
that one.
Or an endless dream. Or those are videos that,
What a life achievement for those proud people.
it either.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Would you like to just,
What life achievements are you most proud of? That's an interesting thing, depending on, what I'm focusing on, early, middle, end.
yeah.
And so that is definitely something, but I've left clear, I've left clear instructions. If they don't know what,
Yeah. What was the, all my material stuff,
I
yeah.
mean, it's just possessions, and if they can't figure that stuff out. I mean, my daughter's already said she's got an empty dumpster and throwing everything into it.
My grandmother had 6 kids. Three floors, 2 living rooms, 6 bedrooms.
It's horrible.
Nothing to do. They each got to choose something. Started bringing the person. But, a lot of hurt feelings.
Well, because
Didn't face it.
like, you should have had and she
They can take turns.
Yes.
And she did.
Yes.
She did.
I need to help with it. You know,
She died just about as nice as she said she would.
So, but that's has to do with me more than
Well, they're so far. It was impressive. I was impressed. It was a bandage. She picked her time.
People have died for thousands of years.
She never proposed last, and I said,
but that's
so I remember this time.
They wouldn't do Christmas. No, you have to take them out. I said, I can't take them
I'll tell them. They should know
I
that.
can't take them out.
They may not
I
listen
thought
to
I was,
me.
I thought I was really good. It took me a while to learn that.
With the loss and then all of that.
That's what I was saying. Stay in bed, he's gone. It's finished.
good for but yeah, well, I've had lots of discussions with kids.
But this is so much, it's probably there.
I just love going out and talking about it to people.
Really feel that way?
Also, the preparation people should have is their marriage, their feelings. I think we have a state issue on there to just have from the record. And how do I do it? They can increase June.
Yeah, I mean, what's the other thing is they Social Security, obviously, these countries have some payment numbers, we need more feedback. Because,
It's only 6 of them.
one of the it was sort of like, in my
Yeah. And you need your parents' birthplace and date because they want that on the death certificate. Yeah, yeah. No, but for some people they might not know. Yeah. Thank you. Great. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Also, there are different parts.
How did that go? What did you have to live again?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I never think that they would have something like that. Who invented things?
Well, it's just because it could be, and also, there's just because of the pandemic, death is that much more in our face. Yes, yeah, yeah.
See, now my kids would freak out.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, I said to my daughter, I'm going to sign this thing to get cremated. She said, no, let's not talk about that.
Oh, see, that's my oldest one, but the other.
And so we haven't had a conversation that I haven't paid the money yet because I don't want to do it without talking to them first.
Yeah, my oldest one is like that. We passed the cemetery, the cemetery, and we all, no. So I said, I want to be married to his wife.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Find the one who will,
Yeah, that will do it.
who will talk about it, and at least somebody knows. Yeah, and put it in writing. Yeah. What did you have?
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
You don't have any of those papers.
The last one,
I know,
It's-
Joe had a stroke, and I got him to the
I
hospital.
would love that. It would be an honor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
And when I got him to the hospital, he couldn't feed himself. He couldn't stay. And 2 days later, he came back and was walking.
Really, I didn't enjoy it.
And that's your right.
But,
Yeah. Great.
I don't remember.
I definitely go peacefully then.
Well, thank you. This has really been great to just see these conversations happening, and
Thank you.
yeah, it's just to practice here, like I said, and some of you are partners, but it can be really challenging with our kids.
A lot to think about.
Yeah, yeah, and so I'm always here. I'll have my cards and some information. I'm going to be doing some. I have one more workshop. Oh, I gotta.
In your experience, what seems to be what would you recommend as an entree to begin a conversation with kids about this stuff?
It's so individual. I think.
I prefer not to watch a movie.
Yeah. Well, it happens, but it's like, start with, I know this is an uncomfortable subject, right? Acknowledge. I'm worried that you are going to shut down. So, you know, set your intention before you start. I just want to have one piece of one conversation, right? And then set that context, you know.
Perhaps it takes, you know, a series of 3.
Oh, yes, yeah, it's not going to necessarily happen in 1 or even 2, or yeah, it can be over years. Like, I didn't want to talk to my dad about it, but he kept getting mail from Compassion and Choices, which is now End of Life Washington. He read this book and wanted me to read it, and I still have his copy where he marked all the places that were important to him. Being mortal. Being mortal.
Of course, you can always tell the kids, you're going to draw up a will, what do they think about it?
Yeah. Do you want to be in the will or not?
I'll have something you want to be in there.
We have actually shared, you know, in culturally.
Who would do what?
Well,
Yeah.
the other thing I found is sometimes if you have multiple children, if they don't, you're saying, okay, I want Jane to make the decision, but if Jane lives in the East Coast, then who does it until Jane gets here?
Yeah.
And also, is it all equal? Is there one, because it's who's best in those situations? Because some people are gonna be so freaked out, they're just gonna say, no, I'm not gonna let you die, because they love you, you know, but
Yeah.
some of your kids will be better at honoring those wishes, so talking about it with them, I think, helps figure that out, because it's not always what you think.
Yeah, and one might be really good at, you know, helping with the ceremony after your death, right? Maybe they're a planner, and so, you know, they can't handle the hospital, they can't handle the financial details, but they'd be great at bringing people together. If you're lucky, or I don't know, if you have more than one child, you know, I don't want to. Yeah.
And my dad had a living will, did not do extraordinary measures. And all of us accepted that except one of my sisters, and she got to the hospice in place first. And she stayed all night with him, and my dad died by himself without needing to not be, he didn't want to be fed intravenously or given liquids.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, this is terrible. Well, he died without that being necessary, and because she had that night with him, she was fine.
No.
But, you know, it was sort of like, how could you do this, Gail?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it worked
So.
out just fine.
Yeah, the conversations.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining me here tonight. It's such an honor. I'll have some flyers on the peace plan. My website is just my name, johannamunson.com. And if you're on Facebook, I have a group called the End of Life Lounge, where I do a lot of education. I also do workshops through the Dahlia Center. And I have one more in this spring series, the 5-minute legacy love letter. The one right before this was 5 steps to successful end-of-life planning conversations. So if you feel like that would be a good one for this group to do, I'm happy to talk to the powers that be and do that here. So I will leave that there. And anybody want to go to Mexico in October? Doing
Dying to go.
Yeah, right? We're going over the Day of the Dead, the Dia de los Muertos, and so it's going to be a wonderful retreat. We have a beautiful resort, so there's information on that, and here are my cards. So again, thank you so much.
Now you can think about what things. You still have time. You have plenty of time to take care of it. Well, I think so.
Well, I don't think you're Nance. I don't think you're gonna do it the same way your husband did.
That would be nice.